Hey, you got those new sticky Dunlops on.
Yeah, they're supposed to be pretty cool.
They as sticky as they say?
That's why I got them. Truth is, I just don't know.
Yeah, see what you mean.
You know, the bike's fast. It's way faster than I am. Let's see what all these other guys are getting on. Let's check them out. Whoa.
Oh, whoa.
Now, this guy's brave. He can really lean it over.
Hey, look at those foot pegs all ground away.
Jeez.
And that tire. Gosh.
Can I help you gentlemen with something?
Is this your bike?
Yes, she is.
Hey, how do you do something like this with a bike like that?
I guess I learned a few things in my days.
Yeah, I guess so.
You got any advice for us?
Advice?
It's a very interesting topic.
You brake straight up.
No way, pup. Trail brake. All the time.
No, bro, I'm pretty sure you're supposed to countersteer in the turns.
Just get more seat time. You'll improve.
No way. You gotta plan out your laps. Be safe.
What you do is you downshift to slow down.
No. Use the brakes.
No, man, it's countersteering.
Body steering, man. It's body steering.
You got to be smooth.
One can hear a lot of advice about riding. Here. I started with this. Yeah. That's the Cornering Bible. Go ahead and read it for a week. And go ahead and bring it back to me.
Wow, thanks.
No problem. Take it easy, guys.
Thanks, you too.
You see you around.
Hi, I'm Keith Code. We hear lots of advice about how to ride. Some of it's destructive advice, some friendly advice, and some useful tips. Let's see how advice stacks up against the technology of riding.
Take how to steer as an example. Most often, our first vehicle had 3 wheels, like this tricycle. Turn the bars to the right, and it goes right. Turn to the left, and it goes left. Simple. Our first ventures out on 2 wheels usually involved training wheels. Now we have a 4-wheeler. From the tricycle experiences, we instinctively turn right to go right, and it works. In the time-honoured method of training, we raise the training wheels. Now we have a recipe for disaster. We've lost 2 wheels. It's now a frighteningly unstable machine. The child expects it to steer like everything else she's ridden. Look what happens though. She steers to the right and the bike tips over to the left, just like all 2-wheeled devices.
Just go for it.
Even with all the bad advice, out of our sense of survival, we somehow make it work.
She has never
But
balanced
do
yet.
we
Lower the training
understand
wheels. You'll kill
the
her.
underlying technology of it? All 2-wheeled vehicles steer differently to 3- and 4-wheelers. To go right, you apply pressure to the right handlebar. That action initiates the turn. The bike then leans over and the front wheel turns into the turn. It's called counter-steering. That's why training wheels are so confusing at first. It's counter to everything the child has learned.
There you go. Hey, good job.
Listen, kid. Steering is simple. You just push down the inside peg, pull the bike in with your knee, push the handlebars down, and lean your body in.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
It was false and misleading advice like that that led me to invent the no BS or no body steering bike. Let's see if it will help us sort out the facts of steering. I've grafted an extra set of bars on this bike. The whole idea was to take the handlebars out of the equation to discover what so-called body steering really does. The extra throttle on the top bars allows the rider to maintain his speed.
Even with massive shifts in body weight without any input through the handlebars, the bike only vaguely changes direction. This would never get you through the corkscrew at Laguna Seca. Foot peg weighting is another myth. Even with his entire body weight on one peg, this bike merely veers off course, and once his course is set, the pressure has even less effect. Good advice doesn't always put the rider in real control and can prevent us from properly being able to do this. A little counter-steering with bar pressure gets the job done and puts the rider in control.
Here, we have mounted a simple pointer on the tank to illustrate counter-steering. Let's take it for a ride and see what happens.
See how the pointer shows the bars moving first to the left and then right, and vice versa? This is counter-steering. It's the only way to accurately steer a motorcycle. It really is simple. Just press on the bar and the bike responds instantly. That's all you do, and it works all the time, every time, even with only one finger. The idea that we lean to steer comes from the fact that when you lean right, you unconsciously pressure the right handlebar, and that counter-steers the bike right. Vice versa for left turns. Lean steering is one of the myths of riding. Some believe body steering works because they can maneuver the bike with their hands off the bars. When we move our weight around on the bike, it actually creates a counter-steering action. Look at the pointer. Some riders are confused about how they steer a bike once they are in a turn. It's exactly the same. To tighten the turn, you press your inside bar. To widen your turn and bring the bike up, you press the outside bar. Counter-steering always works.
Counter-steering is a piece of riding tech that will help you to improve your control in virtually every situation. Let's take a look at some other parts of riding.
You guys really do have the cutting edge of bike technology, don't you? But look at the size of that rear tire. Look at the size of those brakes. I'll bet you really can haul on them if you need to, huh? And the frame is stiff enough to handle all the braking power and the grip of the tires. So how many ponies does it have?
Well over 100.
Mine's around 150. They say it'll do 180.
It's impressive. Guess all that cutting edge stuff can make a difference.
Thanks, man.
But sometimes the cutting edge cuts the rider. What's needed is the riding technology to match the machine's technology. After over a century of development, motorcycles are truly precision cornering machines. But that doesn't eliminate rider error. What stops most riders from being able to use all of that potential?
Man, I was riding as hard as I could, and the guy just disappears.
Yeah, me too, man.
Hey, is there anything in that Twist 2 book you gave us about riding harder?
Here we go. To make real improvement, riders can expect to reach a high level of technical skill, but only if they ride at 75% of their limit. Everyone agrees that in some fashion, survival reactions or...
Survival reaction? What's that? It's like fear?
Yeah. Survival reactions, or SRs, are the ever-present barrier to riders reaching their goals.
That's right. Every time I try to up the pace, I get myself into all sorts of problems. It's like I'm afraid to push my limits. But I'm not sure what I'm afraid of.
It's me too. It's definitely my personal limit. I describe it more like a Mild panic.
Oh, let's ride.
Let's see if we can get out. Where's my key? Where's my key?
What do you mean?
I never took it out. It's not here.
Look in the bag.
It's an agreed upon fact. Our instinctive survival reactions, our SRs, ruin a rider's hopes of being confident and in control.
In riding, there are 8 distinct so-called survival reactions, or SRs, and we can see all of them in this one incident. Immediately, we see the rider trying to use body steering into the turn when he should have countersteered, so he starts out a little wide. If you'd known how to steer the bike, this whole thing could have been avoided. Let's get back and see what other errors were made. He gets on the gas to stabilise the bike, but chops it mid-turn. The bike stands up a bit, and that's SR number 1, chopping the gas from panic. Now he's counter-leaning against the angle of the bike. This increases bike lean angle, but doesn't tighten up the turn as he had hoped. This is another SR. Now the bike is unstable and running wide, so he tightens his grip on the bars. Our most common SR. None of this helped. He's running wide and panics. He's looking everywhere but where he should be. Around the turn. This is visual panic. He target locks on the very thing he doesn't want to hit. An SR? You bet. In a panic, we go where we look. He's steering directly towards the log where his attention is locked. SR number 6. With his attention tunnelling down, he cannot steer effectively and becomes frozen on the bars. Yes, SR number 7. He can't turn, so he jumps on the brakes. Our 8th SR. His lazy steering started the whole mess, but when he chopped the throttle off, it got worse. First, let's take a look at throttle control and how it works.
How'd you feel?
My bike felt terrible on those turns back there. How was yours?
Not too bad, but I didn't have as much grip as I'd like. The roads must have been really slippery.
I think I need to play around with the suspension a little bit. You know how to do that?
Yeah, but not enough. Hey, are there any suspension settings in that twist of the wrist 2 book that guy gave us?
Hold on. It says here that understanding the performance specifications of your bike is one step in reducing throttle control survival reactions that detract from your riding.
Sounds about right. What does that mean?
Considering that most machines in a static or constant speed situation have roughly 50-50 weight distribution, we can begin to calculate the guidelines for correct throttle control through a turn. The fact the rear contact patch is the larger of the two tells the story. Give me more weight, I can handle it. So, once in the corner, our task is to shift 10 to 20% more load to the rear to give it its fair share of load. This we do with the throttle. Technically speaking, we want a slight 0.1 to 0.2 Gs of acceleration to accomplish that. Simply put, in a straight line, it's the force generated by a smooth 5th gear roll-on in the 4 to 6,000 RPM range on pretty much anything over 600cc. That's not much acceleration, but it transfers the weight. Whatever the RPM range, we must maintain the weight transfer by continuing our throttle roll-on. Throttle control rule number 1. Once the throttle is cracked open, it is rolled on evenly, smoothly and continuously throughout the remainder of the turn. This is not just a racing technique. It applies to all corners on all motorcycles. Once the correct transfer of weight is achieved using the throttle, Any big changes in that weight distribution will reduce available traction, which is especially important in poor traction conditions. Once the bike is fully leaned over, violating rule number 1 with poor throttle control will underweight or overweight that particular tyre bike combination. Here again, even in poor traction conditions, good throttle control gives maximum stability and grip. Slides aren't the only negative result from rolling the throttle on and off. For track riding and racing, each throttle on-off or even just a hesitation will cost you time. At least 1/10 of a second, about a bike length, in a slow to medium speed turn. In higher speed turns, the same throttle error will cost you even more. The effects of wind drag are substantial at higher speeds.
If the surface is slippery, do you want to overload the front or rear tires?
No!
Correct. If you're rough or inconsistent with your throttle control, will it reduce traction?
Yes!
Exactly. If you have good throttle control, will the weight be distributed properly on both the front and rear tire?
Yes!
Exactly. Now, what is throttle control rule number 1?
Once the throttle is cracked open, it is rolled on evenly, smoothly, and constantly throughout the remainder of the turn.
Good. Now, repeat that to yourself 1,000 times.
Once the throttle is cracked open, it is rolled.
This rider is late on the gas and gets very hard sudden acceleration out of the turn. This rider is trying for good throttle control and has nice clean roll on, not the same fierce acceleration as the first guy. But what is the actual result in exit speed? Let's look at the radar. A huge difference. There are 2 circumstances under which you may violate throttle control rule number 1. Let's take the point where you are bringing the bike up for the drive out of the corner as the first one. As the bike is brought up towards vertical, we can be more aggressive with the throttle. At some point, you can pin it.
Coordinating your throttle roll-on with bringing up the bike is how to maximize your drive off of any corner on any size bike.
Most riders wait until the bike is nearly upright before they increase the roll-on rate. The skill of it is in accurate timing of the pick-up and roll-on. What difference does it make? Quite a lot. The second exception to throttle control rule number 1 is traction control. Riders can be far more aggressive with mid-corner and exit throttle. Double apex turns are the other exception to the throttle control rule. Since you're actually dealing with 2 turns, it's okay to roll off or stop the roll-on between the 2.
Look at the guy on the Repsol. He's not smooth with the gas.
I bet his wrist hurt.
Told ya.
What are you looking at, kid?
Your tires.
What do you kids know about riding?
Once the throttle is cracked open, it is rolled on evenly, smoothly, and constantly throughout the remainder of the turn.
How long have you
you guys been riding?
About 3 months.
Have you guys ever been at a riding school?
No, but we got this book this guy gave us.
Yeah, just keep reading it.
Come on, boys. It's time to go.
At some of those places, I just couldn't help myself. I kept rolling in and out of the throttle.
That was cool. Completely perfect the whole time.
Really? That's funny, because I still can't get a continuous roll on.
That's SR1. Rolling out of and on and off the throttle when you shouldn't.
That's right. Survivor reactions. How could I forget that?
Good handling means predictable traction, and good traction depends on your suspension working well. In mid-corner, on a properly set up bike, the forks and shock work best in roughly their mid-stroke range. With good throttle control, you can see the forks working in their mid-stroke in mid-corner. Is that as good as it gets? Is the bike happy? Are you happy when the bike is happy? Yes, yes, and yes.
At what range do we want the rear shock to operate? In the middle, of course. That's its most compliant range. That's its sweet spot, just like the forks.
Once you get back on the throttle, weight begins to transfer to the rear. The rear shock becomes our main concern because we must now rely on it more for stability and traction. Contrary to popular opinion, getting on the gas hard makes the back of the bike rise. That applies to both chain and shaft drive bikes. As it rises, the rear suspension becomes stiff. This results in the rear tyre not being able to follow the road's surface as well, and traction is reduced. This becomes abundantly clear when we look at front wheel speed compared to rear wheel speed on a straight. There is quite a bit of tyre slippage, and look at the rear suspension's position. Nearly topped out. Again, it isn't working well. With good throttle control, we get what the bike is designed to deliver: working suspension and optimum traction. Another downside of survival reaction number 1, chopping the throttle, is reduced ground clearance. Not only does the front compress, so does the rear, which further reduces your clearance.
Perfect examples. When the rider is hard on the brakes, the front end wheel feels heavy. Under braking, of course. Check it out.
Man, he is smooth. Good throttle control allows the suspension to work properly, and the bike is smooth. Let's see if we can catch him.
Our new riders might have grasped the idea of good throttle control, but they certainly haven't mastered it yet.
Bye. I figured you guys would come this way.
Well, we figured out why you're so smooth.
They've got it. Your forks, shock, and suspension settings create the potential for good handling. Your throttle control brings that potential into reality.
Good throttle control has a major impact on slides. In controlled slides like these, good throttle control maintains stability. In unwanted or unexpected slides, chopping it makes it worse. Watch this. Good throttle control in reverse can save you from the high side. His smooth roll-off works much better. Practice your roll-off as often as your roll-on. When the time comes, it could make all the difference. Without getting into anything really nasty, like oil on the road, what are the usual conditions that activate our off-the-gas SRs? How about some of these? Water and sand are two big concerns for most riders. While you must not be aggressive with the throttle in situations like this, you certainly don't want to chop it either. What is your best bet if it's really slippery? Well, pick it up as best you can. The less lean angle, the better.
Looks like good throttle control solves many of our rider problems, doesn't it?
Yes.
There are many factors that affect what line a rider may take through a turn, and we'll explore that later. The point we want to make now is this: no matter what line you take, high, low, middle, whatever, good throttle control is the gauge by which you can judge it. Riders are often confused about why the bike initially stands up and runs wide when they get off the gas mid-turn. Once into your lean and the gas is rolled off, weight transfers to the front of the bike, compressing the forks. That weight goes to the front tyre and spreads out the contact patch. This creates additional drag on the patch to the inside of the centre line of the bike. That drag countersteers the bike upwards and it runs wide. The whole thing can seem confusing, especially as the rider expects to tighten the turn when he rolls off the gas, and he finds the opposite of that happening. A moment later, since the gas is off, the bike slows, leans further over, and finally tightens up the turn. Applying brakes mid-corner creates the same effect. When the weight transfers forward, the result is the same. The bike stands up. A static throttle slows the bike as well. Again, the bike tends to run wide. This effect is even more pronounced at higher speeds and steeper lean angles. Getting on the gas too hard too soon will also send the bike offline, wide. Getting on the throttle too slowly makes the bike feel unresponsive. As we see here, with good throttle control, the bike looks and feels stable on its line and leaves the corner faster. Getting the feel for how much throttle the bike wants and needs to be stable and have good traction and hold its line is the art of good throttle control. There are choices in lines, but the good ones follow the throttle control rule.
Geez, I'm running wide on the exit almost every time. And I'm following the throttle control rule. It doesn't make any sense. What's that Twist 2 book say?
You get on the gas as soon as possible.
Well, I'm definitely doing that. But still, coming out, I can't hold my line.
Well, yeah, mine's holding a line. It's just unstable at the beginning. I'm not running wide on the exit, but my bike doesn't feel planted until I get to the apex. I don't know what we're doing wrong.
Let me take a look. Aha, here we go. To meet the throttle control standard, steering is completed before you get it on. This doesn't mean at the apex, right before, or just after, or at any particular part of the turn. It means as soon as possible once the steering is completed. I never thought of that.
See, I was told you have to wait until you get to the apex. I've been scared to get it on before that.
Let's look at all 6 of the off-the-gas results and see why it's so important to follow the throttle control rule and get back to the gas as soon as possible once the bike is turned.
Weight transfers forward, changing our available traction. We've lost our suspension's mid-stroke sweet spot. The bike will tend to overreact to rough pavement and can become a bit twitchy. By creating some instability, the bike initially tends to run wide. As we saw before, we lose ground clearance on both ends of the bike. And lastly, the bike slows down. These are the 6 results you get from waiting too long to get back on the throttle. Getting back on the gas as early as possible solves all of these. The bike becomes planted and predictable, but can you get on the gas too early? This rider got greedy with the throttle way too early, but the solution was correct. Roll off, reduce speed, repoint the bike, and then roll back on. To add lean and throttle at this point of the turn is a common cause of crashes. But this is the way it really should be done.